So it looks like even more incriminating documents have come out against the SEC. This one specifically against Bill Hinman, who was one of the SEC commissioners who brought the lawsuit against Ripple, Brad Garlinghouse, and Chris Larson. So I'm going to tell you what just came out via a FOIA request, a Freedom of Information Act request by 2 Twitter users, as well as what John Deaton and some of the other outside attorneys actually think about some of these inputs. And does this mean that Ripple and the SEC are going to be discussing settlement? Well, I'm going to tell you what John Deaton has to say about it. Also, we're going to talk about the documentation that came out and how it relates to what XRP holders and what Ripple supporters have been right on all along. Hey everyone, my name is Randy. Welcome back to the Late Night Grind. Right now on this channel, we are covering the Ripple versus the SEC case, as well as other cryptocurrency news, investment markets, and personal finance. So if any or all these topics interest you, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Join the Late Night Grind community. Also, if you would do a couple of things, I'd really appreciate it. Smash the thumbs up button and watch this video all the way to the end. Those are the 2 best things you can do to support a YouTube channel, so if you do that, I'd greatly appreciate it. Alright guys, let's jump into it. So with the backdrop of some very important information that just dropped a couple of hours ago, which my next video will be covering, I wanted to talk about this Freedom of Information Act request in which 2 Twitter users, 2 XRP sleuths that have been investigating this SEC versus Ripple case for a long time just received. And this has actually been requested multiple times from multiple people, but now we get the actual documentation. So what is it? Well, this is the Hinman calendar. Now, this is something that the SEC has said previously that doesn't even exist. That's right, they said Bill Hinman's calendar, his governmental calendar, doesn't even exist, therefore they can't give out that information. Well, recently, 2 Twitter users put together a Freedom of Information Act request. In fact, I will link those 2 Twitter users' handles below, and typically in the description of all my videos, you can see several other Twitter handles of people following this case that are very influential XRP and Ripple supporters. But nonetheless, the government actually did submit some of the information that was in the Bill Hinman calendar. But according to John Deaton, it's not exactly the calendar that everybody was hoping for. However, there were some very interesting notes that came out from this documentation. This was actually broken by Eleanor Tourette of Fox Business, who's actually covering this case and ramping up her efforts in covering this case. She actually broke it on Twitter, noting some of the documentation in this calendar, as well as some of the meetings that Bill Hinman had leading up to the speech that gave Ethereum its free pass. Now, in the past, we've covered stories along the lines of how Bill Hinman basically went around the ethics committee in meeting with his former employer because of conflicts of interest, and when they said don't do it, and he did it anyway. Well, the calendar backs that up. And not only is that backed up, but there is information on here that shows that Bill Hinman met with Consensus on 4 different dates leading up to that Ethereum free pass speech. Not only that, he met with Joe Lubin. Not only that, but he met with others involved with Ethereum on the same day that he gave that Ethereum free pass speech. Now, on the surface, this looks like very incriminating evidence, and in terms of what some people speculate might happen, the SEC could very slowly be throwing Bill Hinman underneath the proverbial bus. But one of the more interesting pieces that came out in Bill Hinman's calendar was the fact that on the very same day that he gave the Ethereum free pass speech, he actually met with Ripple's counsel. Now, whether or not that meeting actually happened, it in fact was on his calendar. Now, along the way, the Twitter sleuths that have been looking into the different details of this case, including Bill Hinman, the rest of what the SEC had been doing, they were right about several things, including Bill Hinman meeting with the law firm Andreessen Horowitz, who of course helped pen that Ethereum free pass speech. At least that is the story. And the XRP Twitter sleuths have been right about that. Not only that, Bill Hinman also met with those involved with Ethereum. XRP holders were right about that. All of them leading up to this 2018 speech. Now, some of the more interesting analysis that I've seen from it actually came from John Deaton, who of course is going after the SEC. And he pointed out that this isn't Bill Hinman's full calendar because it doesn't look like his full calendar. In fact, it seems to be missing a few things out of it that XRP holders and Ripple supporters had been looking for. John Deaton notes that he thinks that the SEC kind of approved this information to go out because it wasn't his full calendar. only notes and specific events from his calendar, not the actual full calendar. However, it is interesting because that is going to enable a lot of people to build a timeline of all of the different meetings that took place leading up to this Ethereum Free Pass speech. Because John Deaton noted that there is a very specific part of this calendar that is completely missing, and that is from the time that Bill Hinman went from his previous employer at Simpson Thacher until he became the head of the SEC's Division of Enforcement. There's a specific part, the first part of that calendar, that's completely missing, which is what essentially led John to believe that these are just certain sections taken from Bill Hinman's calendar and not the entirety of his calendar. Now, part of the timeline that John Deaton and others have been building in terms of what the SEC was doing, which of course gives the perception of improprieties and major conflicts of interest. So John Deaton actually brought up the depositions that Bill Hinman had given answers to certain questions that Ripple's counsel was asking. And this is interesting because the calendar notes that were actually given were cross-referenced by the information and the questions that Ripple's counsel was asking Bill Hinman in the depositions. And when he was asked about these specific meetings, do you know what his answers were? Well, his answers were really nothing. In fact, they were a lot of, well, I don't remember. You keep asking about the meeting. His counsel kept referring to the meeting, and no real answers were given, except during the parts where the answers were given, there were just redactions. That's right, Bill Hinman's entire answer was redacted. In fact, John Deaton said several of them had pages upon pages upon pages of redactions. So when he was actually talking about these meetings, well, we're not going to get to see exactly what he answered. That is going to be up to Ripple's counsel to actually use that in their favor. So now that some of this information is continuing to come out, and of course it favors Ripple, Fred Rispoli, who is another outside attorney who at one point was going after the SEC and still plans on going after the SEC at some point, said he believes that a summary judgment will come in favor of Ripple, that it's basically a slam dunk open and shut case. But I'm not going to go so far as to predict that. That's just what he is predicting. However, in terms of a timeline, he thinks that sometime in early 2023 is when that could possibly happen. Ripple getting a win in summary judgment, probably between March, April, and May of 2023. However, there is some new information that just came out from Judge Torres that I'm going to be talking about in my next video. So be sure to stay tuned for that video because not only will I talk about the information that just came down from Judge Torres, but what that could be leading to in terms of the possible end of the case and what John Deaton said about the next 90 days. So be sure to stay tuned for that video. Alright guys, I want to thank you so much for watching this video all the way to the end, for smashing that thumbs up button, and as always, I'll see you guys on the next video. Oh, and I did want to mention, in case you've been watching a couple of my last videos, I have turned off all comments on my videos until further notice, because after reviewing all the comments, I discovered that 93%, yes, 93% of the comments down below in my comments were either spam and or scams. Therefore, I've decided to turn them all off, even though it would benefit my channel to have those comments on my channel and work in favor of the YouTube algorithm. I've decided to turn them off so as to keep the spammers and scammers away from this amazing audience. All right, guys, once again, thank you for watching all the way to the end. Don't forget to check out the next video coming up soon.